I was 25 years old on my second tour in Afghanistan, and I received this message asking me to call my wife. And that kind of thing never happens because when we're on tour, like they don't reach us. Like we call them whenever sort of time and equipment allows. But I already knew straight away that something must be up. But what I didn't know was that within the next 24 hours, my life would change forever. So, being a young lance corporal, my role whenever we went out on a patrol was to be the second in command. And each patrol we had, we would, I was in a group of 12 soldiers called a multiple. And to me at the time, the army was my life. I wanted a job where I get to help people travel the world. So it didn't just become my life, but it was my purpose, it was my identity, and it became my family, and it offered stability. That year, 2009, had already been quite brutal. In February, my best friend Tom was killed, and then shortly after that, I bought a first home, and I moved into that, and then later on got married, and following that, deployed to Afghanistan. So the call from Sadie, she told me that she had grade 3 discariosis, which is basically like the precursor to cervical cancer. I mean, when she said discariosis, I didn't even know how to spell it, let alone what it was. But it's obviously quite serious. It's obviously something that had to be dealt with straight away. And there I was, thousands of miles away and not able to do anything. We also had this rule where, whatever happens at home kind of stays at home, because I can't be distracted. Obviously lives are at stake. Mine, the people around me, it's serious. I can't be distracted. But how could she keep news like that quiet? It would not have been fair or right for her to not tell me about it. So I'm glad that she did. But that night, I ended up having this nightmare where I was out on a foot patrol, and it was just so real. And on that foot patrol, I stepped in an IED, improvised explosive device, and bang, I woke up and I was feeling a bit beside myself. It just seemed so real. And the morning of the 22nd of October 2009, then we went out on patrol, but that feeling was still in me that I woke up with. It's more like wasps in my stomach rather than butterflies. It was just this real sense of, it wasn't right, and it was really difficult to shake. So we went out on patrol, and the multiple I was in had to hold our position on this small hill to provide overwatch, which is basically like cover for the other multiple moving through in the valleys beneath us. And my role as the 2IC was to place everybody out in this all-round defense, which is like a circle on the perimeter of this hilltop. And at the time, the improvised explosive device threat was huge. There basically every time one was detected or exploded, it would be annotated by a little dot on the map of the area, and it just looked like the Milky Way. There was just so many of these things. And to combat this threat, we had these metal detectors that we would use to scan the ground. And the two guys up the front of each patrol, and they would scan the ground as we go. And then obviously, if they find something, they'd mark it and for us to avoid it, or we'd then call in bomb disposal or whatever. So it's very slow, it's very laborious. Once this perimeter was set, the guys with the detectors cleaned or cleared the inside of this circle to make sure the area was safe. The whole day was so far going according to plan. It was a stunning day. There was hardly a cloud in the sky, like the sun was shining, and to the right of us there was this kind of barren desert landscape, and you had a few compounds and stuff, and to the left of us was this lush green sort of valley where he had a river flowing through his centre and all sorts of crops growing and these beautiful mountains in the distance. And every now and then it's like a bit of a breeze that would pick up some sand and you can just kind of feel it against your skin. And it's like this kind of earthy atmosphere. And it actually felt quite peaceful. And I checked in with the guys and then bang, I just got thrown into the air and my whole world was just instantly blocked out with just this thick black smoke and this red dust. And I knew a bomb went off, but I didn't quite know who set it off. And for a moment, I just thought that somebody else did that, but that everybody's been blown away, that I'm like the only one there because I couldn't see or hear anybody. And then I sort of had this strange sensation going through my body and in particular my legs. And it's almost like pins and needles. And as I looked down, I saw that my left leg was completely blown away. And now it's just like a bit of bone sticking out with like soft tissue hanging off of it. And, below my right knee, things were gone. And the first thing when I saw that was just this instant devastation of, when I realized it was me. I'm the one that stepped on that device, and with that goes my career, my future, my hobbies, like everything's gone. And then I thought, okay, well, hang on, I need to calm down. I need to see what else I've got missing. And I brought my hands in front of my face, and I saw the state of them. They're all like mangled, and had like open fracture on my arm, and there's other open wounds, and it's just like blood pouring out everywhere. And I just remember like my chin strap was choking me, so I remember picking that with my thumb, and I took my helmet off, and then I just suddenly was overcome with this intense raging pain that was just tearing through my body as something like I never felt before. And then I could just feel my life like fading into the ground beneath me, because I was just, obviously there's a lot of blood coming out, and I just wanted to close my eyes and go to sleep. But I remember thinking, no, I can't do that, because if I go to sleep, I'll never wake back up again. And anyway, at that point, I just cried out to God, and I was like, okay, God, please, just give me some strength, because I can't die here like this. And I did have this bit of energy come in me that just helped me keep my eyes open at least. And the guys got me back to the base pretty quickly, and we went now waiting for the helicopter to come in. And as it came into land, I just remember like the heat from the engines like washing over me, and all this dust being kicked up as the guys were trying to shelter me, and they got me onto the back. And by now, this fight was really difficult. I couldn't really hang on anymore. My whole world just started closing in, and I knew at that point then that was it. This is my last moment. But out of like panic, I don't know how, but I somehow mustered enough strength to get the medic's attention, and and I told her I can't do it. And that's when she said, okay, we've got you. And everything just went black. The next thing I knew, I opened my eyes and I could see Sadie standing there, and she's trying to say something to me. Basically, she was taking the mick, because when I opened my eyes for the first time, they were facing opposite directions, and a bit of humour kind of goes a long way. And that's when I knew that I made it, that I'm in the right place. But at the same time, as I became aware of my surroundings, I felt I had this horrible tube go down my throat, and I had this machine to the side of me making this breathing noise. And anyway, it was keeping me alive, and I was told that I had pneumonia and swine flu, and the doctors had basically given me everything that they could, and I just didn't know if I was going to pull through. I was unable to lift my arms, I was unable to sit up, I was unable to do anything, and it wasn't even 24 hours before that I was this active soldier, and now I'm here and I can't even control my own breathing. And I just remember thinking, like, how am I going to be like a husband? Am I ever going to be a father? How am I just going to exist? How's this going to be life? And I just kind of got to this point where I felt pretty low, almost like I actually didn't really want to be there. And I just got to like this junction where I felt like giving up. But it's kind of then thinking, well, what's that going to achieve, isn't it? It's like giving up is going to be guaranteed failure as such. My only option really is to fight. This was kind of like the first lesson, which is that of acceptance, because the situation is what it is. There's nothing I can do about it. I can't go back and change things. I can't make a different decision. It is what it is. And really, the moment that I kind of demonstrated how I accepted things was, I was there and I was busy pulling things off, and I was saying to Sadie, look, we're going to go home. That's it. Let's go. And basically Sadie like shouted at me, not shouted, but she had to get cross, saying, right, what are you doing? Like, your arm is flexing. You, if that goes, that's gonna have to be amputated. And she basically got quite cross. She was like, you can't go anywhere. And she was right. And that's when I kind of just started hitting my head on this pillow, and she was asking, like, what are you doing now? And I just said, well, if I'm going to stay here, then I may as well get comfortable. But then, obviously having nothing but time and a ceiling to stare at, my brain started racing into things like, okay, what next? Like, I need to get out of here. I need to kind of, come on. I was starting to get really kind of anxious. But this is where patience then comes in, because, some things take as long as they take. There are no shortcuts. There's no, people can't force this. I can't force this. I literally have to be patient and just wait for the medication to take its course, and for my body to start healing, and for the doctors and nurses to do what they need to do. And the other thing that I noticed was just how hard everybody was working around me. These people were digging out blind to keep me going, and a lot of people put their faith and trust into me getting through this, and their hope. So I also kind of owe it to them, and ultimately myself, to do this properly, to be patient, and to accept the situation and move forward. In the military, we get trained for that all the time. Plans change, you come up with a new one, you press on, and you keep going. But this is definitely by far the hardest version of that I've ever had to live through. And, by now, the first battle is kind of behind me. Well, physically at least anyway. And Sadie was there with me throughout all of it. And whatever happened since, I'll always be grateful. Surviving that explosion was really just the beginning. What came next was like years of recovery and trying to rebuild a life I had before, and then getting through things when life fell apart again. But that's all coming in part 2. But if you're going through something right now that you feel is unsurvivable, just stay with me, because I can promise you that you will get through it. You will find a way through, and I'm living proof of that. So if this resonated with you, please give it a subscribe and tune in for part 2.